She slapped an elderly woman and smiled while doing it. For 3 years, this Korean mafia boss's wife ruled a Chicago penthouse like it was her personal kingdom. Nobody questioned her bloodline. Nobody dared to look her in the eye, until the day a desperate maid's grandmother with decades of buried secrets recognized the face behind the designer makeup. This is the true story of how a 70-year-old woman dismantled a criminal queen. Not with weapons or money, but with a single sentence in a language the queen thought she'd escaped forever. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll never trust a beautiful facade again. This is a story about identity. No, it's about something far more dangerous than that. Stay with me. Let me tell you a story about fake royalty, real power, and what happens when the wrong grandmother walks through the door. Welcome to Soul-Woven Stories. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Now, let's get back to the story. In the heart of Chicago, 50 floors above the streets where normal people lived, there was a penthouse that didn't feel like a home. It felt like a fortress. Marble floors so polished you could see your failure reflected in them. Floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city into a kingdom below. Even the silence felt expensive, heavy with the weight of money earned through blood and fear. And in this world of Italian leather and implicit threats, there was one name that made the housekeeping staff hold their breath. Victoria Minho. She was the wife of Minho Park, the Korean crime lord who controlled everything from the docks to the downtown clubs. His name made gangsters cross the street. But Victoria, she made something different happen. She made decent people feel worthless. Every morning at precisely 9 a.m., she would emerge from the master suite. Always dressed like she was attending a soul socialite brunch, always moving like the floor itself should be grateful for her footsteps, and always ready to destroy someone's dignity if they dared to exist incorrectly in her presence. The staff had learned to become invisible. They'd seen what she could do. There was Maria, a housekeeper with 2 kids, fired because she'd placed a water glass 2 inches to the left of where Victoria expected it. Victoria didn't just fire her. She called immigration on her, knowing Maria's papers were still processing. And according to Dorothy, who witnessed it, Victoria laughed while making the call. That's the kind of person Victoria Minho was. Now, into this world of cruelty disguised as elegance walked a woman who wasn't supposed to be there at all. Grace Williams. She was 70 years old, and today, she'd made a simple mistake. She'd forgotten that her granddaughter Dorothy had left her inhaler at home. Dorothy had been working as Victoria's maid for 8 months now, ever since the temp agency she'd been with had gone under. 8 months of swallowing insults. 8 months of scrubbing floors that were already clean. 8 months of watching a woman who claimed to be descended from Korean nobility treat human beings like disposable rags. Grace had raised Dorothy alone after Dorothy's parents died. She'd worked her whole life, not as a maid, not as someone powerless. Grace had been a translator. The kind governments called when they needed someone who understood not just languages, but the spaces between words where secrets hid. She'd worked in embassies across Asia for 30 years, sitting in rooms where one mistranslation could start a war, listening to criminals confess in languages they thought were safe. But none of that mattered anymore. She was just a grandmother now. Just an old black woman in a worn coat, stepping into a world of crystal and contempt, carrying an inhaler for her granddaughter. She didn't know that the moment she stepped off that elevator, everything was about to change. She didn't know that Victoria Minho's perfect mask was about to crack. And she certainly didn't know that the face she was about to see, the face that had been sculpted and painted and protected by money and violence, was a face she'd seen before. In a completely different country. Attached to a completely different name. Dorothy heard the elevator chime and her blood turned to ice. She was on her knees in the living room, scrubbing already spotless marble with a toothbrush because Victoria had decided the regular mop left streaks that offended her. The bucket of lemon-scented water beside her had gone cold an hour ago, but she didn't dare stop. Not when Victoria was in one of her moods. "Miss Dorothy, you forget this at home again." Grace's voice carried across the penthouse, warm and steady, completely unaware of the danger she'd just walked into. Dorothy's head snapped up. No. Not today. Not now. Her grandmother stood by the elevator in her Sunday coat, the navy blue one with the worn elbows she refused to replace, holding up the small inhaler like it was a prize. Grace was smiling, proud that she'd remembered, proud that she could help. Victoria emerged from the hallway like a silk-wrapped serpent, her Louboutins clicking against the marble in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. Who? Victoria said, her voice dropping to that dangerous whisper the staff had learned to fear more than screaming. Gave you permission to enter my home. Grace's smile faltered, but only slightly. She'd faced down dictators, translators in Seoul and Beijing. She wasn't easily intimidated. I'm Dorothy's grandmother, ma'am. She left her. I don't care if you're the Queen of England. Victoria moved closer, circling Grace like a predator assessing prey. You look at this floor. You see how clean. Your shoes, they bring street dirt into my house. Dorothy's grandmother or not, you are nobody here. Dorothy scrambled to her feet, her hands still dripping with cleaning solution. Mrs. Minho, please, I'm so sorry, she didn't know. Shut your mouth. Victoria didn't even look at her. Her eyes were fixed on Grace, and something ugly was blooming in her expression. You know what I see? I see typical American. No respect. No class. You people, you come to this country, you think you deserve everything. But you are nothing. Your granddaughter scrubs my floors because that's all she's worth. And you? You're even less. Grace's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She just stared at Victoria, her eyes moving with the precision of someone reading a text. From Victoria's face to her neck. From her neck to the jade pendant hanging there. From the pendant to the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Something shifted in Grace's expression. A flicker of recognition, there and gone so fast Dorothy almost missed it. You don't belong in my world, Victoria continued, her voice rising now, feeding off her own venom. You think because you old, I show you respect. In Korea, we respect elders who earn it. Not street trash who raise maids. She stepped forward and shoved Grace. Hard. Not enough to knock her down, Victoria was too calculated for that. Just enough to make her stumble backward, to remind her of her place, to humiliate her in front of her granddaughter. Dorothy lunged forward. Grandma. But Grace caught herself. She straightened slowly, adjusting her coat with the same dignity she'd worn in embassy halls. Her glasses had slipped down her nose from the impact. She pushed them back up, and when she looked at Victoria again, her eyes had gone completely cold. Korean, Grace said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that made even Victoria pause. You say you're Korean. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. And the jade pendant at Victoria's throat seemed to catch the light differently now, like evidence hanging in plain sight. Victoria's perfectly painted lips curved into a sneer. Of course I'm Korean. Pure soul bloodline. My family name is Han, older than your country. She fingered the jade pendant at her throat like it was a weapon. But what would you know about lineage? About heritage that matters? Grace didn't respond. She was staring at Victoria's neck with an intensity that made Dorothy's stomach twist. Not at the pendant. At something just below it. A scar. Small, crescent-shaped, barely visible beneath the expensive foundation Victoria wore. The kind of scar you'd only notice if you'd seen it before, in a different context, on a different face. Grandma? Dorothy whispered, but Grace raised one finger. Wait. Victoria noticed the stare and instinctively touched her neck. What are you looking at, old woman? You want to see real jewelry? This jade belonged to my great-grandmother in Gangnam. Worth more than everything you've ever owned. Gangnam didn't have the wealth districts until the 1970s, Grace said quietly. The words came out automatic, factual. Before that, it was farmland. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victoria's smile froze. What did you say? And that scar. Grace took one step forward, and Dorothy had never seen her grandmother look like this. Like she was back in an interrogation room, piecing together a puzzle from fragments of lies. Crescent-shaped. About 2 centimeters. On the left side of your neck, just above the clavicle. Victoria's hand flew to her throat. I don't know what you're. I know that scar. Grace's voice was steady as steel. I saw it 23 years ago. In an immigration processing center in Fujian province. On a young woman who was trying to get papers to leave China. She had that exact scar because her mother had burned her with a cooking iron when she was 7. She told the translator, she told me, that she wanted to forget that mark ever existed. The color drained from Victoria's face beneath her makeup. Dorothy's breath caught. Fujian province. China. Not Korea. You're confused, Victoria said, but her voice had lost its venom. Now it just sounded sharp, desperate. I've never been to any processing center. I'm Korean. I was born in Seoul. My family. Your family name isn't Han. Grace took another step closer, and Victoria actually backed up. The real Han Minyoung died in a car accident in 2019 outside of Busan. I saw the report when I was consulting for the State Department's East Asia Division. Single vehicle collision. No family to claim the body. Very convenient for someone who needed a clean identity. Victoria's breathing had gone shallow. One of her hands gripped the back of a chair so hard her knuckles went white. Who are you? The question came out strangled. Grace smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm someone who spent 30 years listening to people lie in 6 different languages. I'm someone who remembers faces, even when they're buried under surgery and expensive cosmetics. And I'm someone who knows exactly what happens to women who steal identities to marry into organizations they have no business touching. She paused, letting the silence stretch like a blade. The question isn't who I am. The question is who are you, Li Wei? Victoria's face shattered. The penthouse door crashed open. Minho Park entered like a storm given human form, flanked by 2 men who looked like they'd been carved from violence and expensive suits. The guards' tattoos crept up from their collars, traditional Korean dragons and tigers that marked them as members of the Giminpa, the organization that controlled everything from Lake Michigan to the state line. These weren't men who asked questions. They were men who made problems disappear. Dorothy felt her knees go weak. She'd only seen Minho twice before, always from a distance, always with her eyes down. He was shorter than she expected but built like compressed rage, his salt and pepper hair slicked back, his face sharp as broken glass. Victoria. His voice carried the weight of authority that didn't need to be raised. I heard shouting. And just like that, Victoria transformed. The fear that had cracked across her face seconds ago vanished, replaced by tears that appeared so quickly Dorothy would have believed them if she hadn't just witnessed what came before. Victoria rushed to her husband, stumbling slightly in her heels, one hand clutching her throat where Grace had mentioned the scar. Minho, thank God you're here. Her voice broke perfectly, practiced emotion flowing like rehearsed lines. This woman, she forced her way in, she attacked me, she tried to steal my jade pendant. Grace didn't move. Didn't defend herself. She just stood there, watching Victoria perform, her expression unreadable. Minho's eyes swept the room. Dorothy. Grace. His wife trembling against his chest. The calculation happened in seconds. You. He pointed at Grace. You put your hands on my wife? I did not, Grace said calmly. She's lying. Victoria pulled back from Minho, and now the tears were falling, real or fake, Dorothy couldn't tell anymore. She came here pretending to be Dorothy's grandmother, but I saw her looking at my jewelry, I saw her reaching for it, and when I confronted her, she pushed me and started saying horrible things about my family, about Korea, saying I wasn't who I claimed to be. Because you're not, Grace said. The 2 guards moved forward. They positioned themselves on either side of Grace like parentheses around a death sentence, their tattooed hands flexed and ready. Dorothy wanted to scream, wanted to run to her grandmother, but her legs wouldn't work. Minho held up one hand and the guards froze. He studied Grace with the attention of a man who'd stayed alive this long by reading people. "You're making accusations about my wife's identity," he said softly. "In my home. That's bold for someone who looks like they can't afford their next meal." "Appearances," Grace said, meeting his eyes without flinching, "can be deceiving. Your wife should know that better than anyone." Victoria made a sound like a wounded animal. "She's insane, Minho. Call the police. Have her arrested. She's trying to turn you against me, I'm someone who knows exactly who your wife was before she became Victoria Minho," Grace interrupted. "And I can prove it." Minho's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the room's atmosphere. He gestured to the guards. "Search her." The guards moved with mechanical efficiency, patting down Grace's worn coat, checking her pockets, her purse. They found nothing. A wallet with $43. Dorothy's inhaler. A grocery store receipt. The keys to an apartment in a neighborhood where Minho's people collected protection money. "Nothing," the taller guard said, his English thick with a Busan accent. Minho's jaw tightened. He looked at Grace with the same expression Dorothy imagined he used before ordering someone's execution. "You waste my time with lies about my wife. You come into my home. You upset her." He turned to Dorothy, who felt her bladder nearly give out. "Your grandmother. Your responsibility." "Please," Dorothy heard herself whisper. "Please," she didn't mean. "Jin-soo." Minho didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The guard with the tiger tattoo crawling up his neck stepped forward, reaching inside his jacket. Victoria watched from behind her husband, her tears drying now, satisfaction creeping back into her features. She'd won. Like she always won. But Grace spoke, and the words that came out weren't English. "Ni haishi jide linshan suan de laojing ma?" Mandarin. Fluid, accent-perfect Mandarin with the tonal precision of someone who'd spent years speaking it professionally. Dorothy had never heard her grandmother speak anything but English. Victoria went absolutely white. The question hung in the air like smoke. Grace hadn't raised her voice. Hadn't moved. But something about the way she'd said it made Victoria take an involuntary step backward. Minho's head turned slowly toward his wife. "What did she say?" Victoria's mouth opened. Closed. Her hands were shaking now, and these weren't performed trembles. These were real. Grace tilted her head, her eyes never leaving Victoria's face. "I asked her if she still remembers the old well in Linshan village. It's a small place. Very rural. In Fujian province. Near the coast. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone's family. Everyone's secrets. I don't know what she's talking about." Victoria's voice had gone thin, stretched tight. "I've never been to Fujian. I'm Korean. I'm from Seoul. Tell her, Minho, tell her she's crazy." "Ni mama haizai neli," Grace continued in Mandarin, each word landing like a stone. "Your mother is still there. Still living in the same house where she burned you with that iron. Still telling the neighbors her daughter ran away to become a whore in the city." Victoria made a sound like she'd been stabbed. Minho's expression had gone completely cold. He didn't speak Mandarin, Dorothy could tell, but he spoke violence, and he knew what fear looked like. He'd built an empire on recognizing it. "Victoria." His voice could have cut steel. "Why does this woman speak to you in Chinese?" "I don't, she's confused, she." "Answer him," Grace said softly, switching back to English. "Tell your husband why you understand every word I just said. Tell him why you flinched when I mentioned your real mother. Tell him why that scar on your neck burns the same way it did when you were 7 years old in a village you've spent 15 years pretending never existed." Victoria's legs gave out. She caught herself on the chair, her perfect composure shattered like expensive china on marble. Minho turned to his guards, his voice dropping to Korean. Whatever he said made both men straighten, their hands moving inside their jackets. The temperature in the room plummeted. Victoria was still gripping the chair, her breathing ragged, her carefully constructed mask crumbling piece by piece. She looked at Grace with pure hatred now, all pretense of tears abandoned. You have no proof. No proof of anything. Just the ramblings of a senile old woman who... Dorothy. Grace's voice cut through Victoria's panic like a scalpel. The laundry room. The basket with the silk blouses. There's a zipper pocket sewn into the bottom lining. Dorothy's head snapped toward her grandmother. What? I saw Victoria hide something there 3 weeks ago when I came to drop off your lunch. I didn't think much of it then. Grace's eyes hadn't left Victoria. But I think we should look now. Victoria lunged forward. Don't you dare touch my things, you have no right. Minho's hand shot out, catching his wife's wrist. His grip looked gentle but Victoria froze like she'd been struck. Get it, he said to Dorothy. Dorothy's legs moved on autopilot. She practically ran to the laundry room, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. The basket was exactly where it always was, expensive silk blouses waiting to be hand-washed because Victoria didn't trust the dry cleaners. Her fingers found the bottom lining. The zipper pocket was tiny, expertly sewn, invisible unless you knew to look for it. Inside was a phone. Not Victoria's iPhone with its crystal-encrusted case. A burner. Cheap, prepaid, the kind people used when they didn't want to be tracked. Dorothy's hands shook as she pulled it out, as she pressed the power button. The screen lit up. No password. And the message thread at the top was in Chinese characters Dorothy couldn't read, but the contact name was clear enough even in translation. Baba. Father. Dorothy's stomach dropped. She scrolled. Messages going back months. Years. Photos loaded slowly on the cheap connection. A middle-aged man in a rural village. A woman who could have been Victoria's mother. Children. And wire transfer confirmations. Dozens of them. Hundreds of thousands of dollars sent to an account in Fujian province. The most recent message was from 2 days ago. Even through the translation app's broken English, the meaning was clear. When are you sending more money? Wei Wei needs surgery. You promised you'd take care of family. Dorothy walked back to the living room on numb legs, the phone clutched in her hand like evidence of a murder. Minho took it from her without a word. His face revealed nothing as he scrolled, but Victoria made a sound like a dying animal. It's not what it looks like. Minho held up one hand and Victoria's voice cut off like he'd flipped a switch. He kept scrolling. Each second of silence felt like a bomb ticking down. When he finally looked up at his wife, Dorothy saw something in his expression that terrified her more than his anger ever could. Disappointment. Li Wei, he said quietly, using the name Grace had spoken. How long have you been stealing from me to send to your real family in China? Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. No words came out. No more lies. The phone in Minho's hand held every truth she'd spent years burying. Minho turned to Grace, and for the first time since entering, Dorothy heard something other than threat in his voice. Curiosity. Who are you? Really? Grace straightened her worn coat, adjusting it with the dignity of someone stepping up to a podium. My name is Grace Williams. For 32 years, I worked as a senior translator and cultural liaison for the United States State Department, specializing in East Asian languages and dialects. Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, Japanese, and 4 regional Chinese dialects most people have never heard of. Dorothy's world tilted. Her grandmother. Her grandmother who made Sunday pot roast and watched game shows and complained about her arthritis. That grandmother? I worked in embassies from Seoul to Beijing to Tokyo, Grace continued, her voice taking on a weight Dorothy had never heard before. I sat in rooms where treaties were negotiated. Where defectors told their stories. Where criminals confessed to things that would make your organization look like shoplifters. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably. Even they could sense the shift in power dynamics. In 1999, I was part of a joint task force tracking human trafficking networks operating between rural China and South Korea. We processed thousands of cases. Women trying to escape poverty. Men seeking work. And con artists looking for new identities. Grace's eyes locked on Victoria. I remember Li Wei because she was 17 years old and already an accomplished liar. She'd stolen her dead cousin's birth certificate, claimed she was 22, and tried to get papers to Seoul by seducing a low-level immigration officer. Victoria flinched like she'd been slapped. We denied her application. Flagged her file. The last I heard, she'd disappeared into the underground economy in Guangzhou. Grace paused. I never imagined she'd successfully steal a dead woman's identity and infiltrate a Korean criminal organization. That took creativity. Minho's jaw was clenched so tight Dorothy could see the muscle jumping. You knew all this. When you walked in here, you knew. I suspected when I saw the scar. I was certain when she responded to Mandarin. Grace gestured to the phone still in Minho's hand. But I didn't know about the money laundering. That's ambitious even for her. Why? Minho's question was directed at Victoria, but she'd shrunk into herself, all her aristocratic posture collapsed. Why marry me if you were just going to steal? Victoria's laugh came out broken. You think I had a choice? I owed money to people in China who would have killed me. I needed protection. I needed your name, your power. Her voice turned bitter. And yes, I sent money to my real family. The family you thought was too low class to exist. Because unlike your precious Korean bloodlines, they actually needed help. So you used me. Minho's voice had gone quiet again. Dangerously quiet. We used each other. Victoria met his eyes, and for the first time, Dorothy saw something real in her face. Defiance. You wanted a beautiful Korean wife to show off to your partners. I gave you that. The fact that she was Chinese wearing a dead woman's name? That's your failure, not mine. Minho's face remained carved from stone, but the guard with the dragon tattoo actually took a step back. Whatever Victoria had just said, it had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Grace shook her head slowly, and when she spoke, it was with the clinical precision of someone delivering an autopsy report. It wasn't just identity theft. It was premeditated identity appropriation with multiple layers of fraud. Let me tell you how it actually worked. She turned slightly so she could address both Minho and his guards, like she was briefing officials again. The real Han Minyoung died in October 2019 in Busan. Single vehicle accident on a coastal road. Her car went off a cliff. The body was burned beyond easy recognition. Grace paused. No family came forward because she was estranged from them. No friends because she'd just moved back from studying abroad in Canada. She was perfect. A ghost waiting to be worn like a suit. Victoria stared at the floor, her hands balled into fists. Li Wei, your wife, was working in a high-end hostess bar in Guangzhou at the time, running from debt collectors who'd already broken 3 of her fingers as a warning. Grace's voice remained steady, factual. She'd learned about Han Minyoung through the criminal networks. Someone always knows someone. She paid a records forger in Shenzhen to create a false paper trail. Birth certificate. University transcripts. Medical records. Everything a Korean woman returning from Canada would have. How much? Minho asked quietly. $50,000. Money she didn't have, which put her deeper in debt. Grace tilted her head. So she needed to make it worth it. She spent 6 months studying everything about Han Minyoung. Her mannerisms from old social media posts. Her family history from obituaries. She even had surgery to make her eyes look more Korean, to soften her Chinese features. Dorothy felt sick. She'd spent 8 months cleaning this woman's home, never knowing everything about her was a performance. She entered South Korea in March 2020 using Han Minyoung's passport, Grace continued. COVID helped her. Masks everywhere. Social distancing. Harder to verify faces. She went to Seoul and started appearing at the right clubs, the right restaurants, places where powerful men looked for trophy wives. And I saw her. Minho's voice was hollow. At the Golden Tiger Club. She was sitting alone, drinking wine, looking like she belonged to a different world. She studied you too, Grace said, not unkindly. She knew you needed a wife who spoke Korean fluently, who understood the culture, who could stand beside you at meetings with other organizations and look the part. She knew you'd lost your previous wife to cancer 2 years earlier. She knew you were vulnerable. I wasn't vulnerable. But Minho's voice lacked conviction. Everyone's vulnerable to the right lie told at the right time. Grace's expression softened slightly. Li Wei is many things, but she's not stupid. She gave you exactly what you needed. A beautiful Korean wife from a good family. Someone who made you look legitimate. Someone who understood the importance of appearances in your world. Victoria finally looked up, her makeup streaked with real tears now. I made you look good. I played my role perfectly. For 3 years, I was everything you wanted. You were a fraud, Minho said. So are you. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Minho moved so fast Dorothy didn't see it coming. One moment he was standing still, the next his hand was around Victoria's throat, slamming her back against the wall beside the window. Not choking her. Just holding her there. Making a point. Say that again, he whispered. Victoria's eyes were wild, but she'd already jumped off the cliff. Might as well see how far the fall went. You pretend to be a legitimate businessman. You wear expensive suits and donate to charities and act like your money isn't soaked in blood. So don't lecture me about fraud, Minho. We're both liars. I'm just better at it. His hand tightened slightly, then released. He stepped back, breathing hard, and Dorothy saw something crack in his expression. Not anger anymore. Something worse. Humiliation. Grace cleared her throat softly. There's more. Minho turned to her, and Dorothy wanted to scream at her grandmother to stop, to leave it alone. They'd already won, Victoria was finished. But Grace's face said she wasn't done. Not yet. The man in those photos on the burner phone. His name is Chen Weichang. Grace's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. He's not her father. He's her husband. The room went dead silent. Victoria's face drained of what little color remained. They married in 2018 in a village registry office in Fujian province, Grace continued, relentless now. Before she ever became Han Minyoung. Before she ever met you. She never divorced him. Under Chinese law, under any law that matters, Li Wei is still married to Chen Weichang. Minho looked like he'd been shot. You married me while married to someone else. It wasn't legal anyway, Victoria spat. We had a ceremony, not a real wedding. You didn't want government records. You said it was safer that way, remember? So what does it matter if? The children. Grace's voice cut through Victoria's justification like a knife. Show him the other photos, Dorothy. Dorothy's hands shook as she took the phone from Minho, scrolling to the images her grandmother must have seen over his shoulder. 2 children. A boy around 8, a girl maybe 5. Both with Victoria's eyes. Those aren't just any children, Grace said quietly. Those are her children. With Chen Weichang. Living in Linshan village. The money you thought was going to distant relatives? It was going to her real family. Her husband. Her son and daughter. The life she never actually left. Victoria lunged for the phone, but the guard with the tiger tattoo caught her effortlessly, holding her back while she screamed. They're mine. My babies. You don't understand, I had to leave them, I had to, but I never stopped being their mother. You stopped being my wife. Minho's voice was arctic. You were never my wife. He turned to Grace, and Dorothy saw something shift in his face. The rage was still there, simmering underneath, but now it was focused. Controlled. This was the man who'd built an empire. The man who survived by making calculated decisions. Mrs. Williams, he said formally. You've done me a service today. Saved me from a woman who would have destroyed everything I built. He paused. Name your price. Grace looked at Minho for a long moment, and Dorothy saw something pass between them. A recognition. Two people who understood power and how it moved through the world like electricity through wire. I don't want your money, Grace said. Minho's eyebrow raised. Everyone wants money. I want my granddaughter released from her employment. Immediately. With no record of her ever working here, no reference that ties her to your organization, nothing that connects her to this penthouse or to you. Grace's voice was firm. I want us to walk out of here and disappear. That's the price. Victoria laughed, hysterical and broken. That's it? That's all you want? You stupid woman, you could have asked for millions. Jean Sue. Minho didn't raise his voice. The guard moved, dragging Victoria toward the hallway. She fought, screaming obscenities in Mandarin now, all pretense of Korean aristocracy abandoned. Her designer heels scraped against the marble she'd made Dorothy polish. What will happen to her? Dorothy heard herself ask. Minho's expression revealed nothing. She'll be on a plane to China by midnight. After that, she's Chen Weichong's problem. He paused. If he's smart, he'll take the money she stole from me and disappear. If he's not, my associates in Fujian will have questions for him. Victoria's screaming faded as the guard pulled her deeper into the penthouse. A door slammed. Silence returned like a held breath released. Minho walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a bank envelope. He counted out bills with practiced efficiency. 50. 100. He stopped at $5,000 and held it out to Grace. I said I don't want. It's not payment. Minho's voice was quieter now, almost respectful. It's severance for your granddaughter. 2 months' salary. She earned it by surviving my wife's cruelty. He paused. And by having a grandmother with the spine to stand in front of armed men and destroy a liar with nothing but truth. Grace took the envelope slowly. She counted it, then nodded once. We'll accept this. You're a warrior, Mrs. Williams. Minho said it like a statement of fact. In another life, you would have been dangerous in my world. In this life, Grace said calmly, I'm dangerous to anyone who mistakes kindness for weakness. Something that might have been a smile flickered across Minho's face. Get out of Chicago. Tonight if possible. I'll honor our agreement, but some of my associates might have questions about today. Better if you're not here to answer them. Dorothy grabbed her coat from the closet with shaking hands. She didn't look back at the penthouse, at the marble floors she'd scrubbed, at the prison she'd been trapped in for 8 months. Grace took her hand as they walked to the elevator. The doors closed on Minho standing in his empty penthouse, the Chicago skyline glittering behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows, master of an empire who'd just learned he didn't know his own home. In the elevator, Dorothy finally broke. Grandma, you were a translator for the State Department? Why didn't you ever tell me? Grace squeezed her hand. Because that life was over, baby. I wanted to just be your grandmother. She smiled softly. But I guess some things you never forget. Languages. Faces. How to recognize a liar. The elevator descended 50 floors, carrying them away from silk and violence and lies, back down to street level where ordinary people lived ordinary lives. Where Dorothy and Grace Williams would disappear into the Chicago night, 2 women who'd walked into a monster's den and walked back out alive. And that's how a 70-year-old grandmother took down a criminal queen with nothing but the truth. If this story kept you watching until the end, hit that subscribe button right now. We're building a community of people who love stories where the underdog wins, and I don't want you to miss what's coming next. Drop a comment telling me, would you have the courage to stand up to someone like Victoria? I read every single one. See you in the next story.